Welcome, everyone, to Let's Gigabit podcast. My name's Todd Rawlings. I'm here with my good friend and podcast mate, Mike Farabelli. Hey, Mike.
Hi, everybody.
And
Exciting
also,
topic today
yes,
to an Italian is food. All
yes,
about the economics of food. So I'm excited, Todd.
There you go.
absolutely. And another good friend, old friend, Mark Freeman. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Todd. Hey, Mike. Good to see you all. And this is going to be an exciting adventure to talk through some of this stuff. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, exactly. So, Mark and I met a while back at Microsoft. He was really a great sponsor of various technologies that we were trying to pursue in the garage and in food services in general. You helped kind of sponsor some hackathons for us.
Mhm.
Do you remember some of those more infamous projects, Mark? Do you want to maybe just give a little background and talk?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I ran the dining program at Microsoft from about 2005 to 2018. So I guess, what is that? 13 years or something, right? And when I first came into Microsoft, I mean, a food program in a big organization like that is a cost center for Microsoft. And I wanted to change that and make it a profit center for Microsoft. And so the way that I figured out to be able to do that was to engage with the sales teams so that when they brought a customer in, they would be able to bring them to lunch in one of our 90 different food service operations. If they brought somebody in there, they could see software in operation as opposed to sitting in in a room watching PowerPoints or whatever. And so I started doing that. I started inviting the sales teams to bring their customers in and take a look at what we were doing. And we were using all Microsoft software. And so they latched onto that. Number one, they got their clients a free lunch, which was good. And then they also were able to hopefully sell some more software because of that, right? And so then what that did was drove me to continue to bring software and different technologies into the food program. And Todd, I think that's where we kind of hooked up. I spent a lot of time in the garage just watching and seeing what they were doing there to be able to have a kind of a food service look towards it, to say, hey, we could use that in food service, right? Or we could use that in our cafes to do whatever it is we might want to do. And it took me down some pretty wild roads. One of the first kind of activities that we got started was had to do with growing our own food, right? So what I wanted to be able to do was grow. How fresh can you get with growing it in a cafe, right? And so we got into hydroponics and vertical farming. And all I did was it's called the Tower Garden. It has 28 grow sites on it. It's all lit up, and I put about 4 of them in the cafe. Well, what happens at Microsoft is people come down to lunch and they see this and they immediately want to digitize it, and they want to engineer it and data scientists and do stuff with it, right? And so, sure, come on, take a look, let's do. And so I had farms that were all digitally connected to the cloud. And, we were monitoring all of the humidity, the water, the pH, the growth. We had cameras on them, so we were watching the lettuce grow. We were doing all kinds of things with that. And what I was able to do was be able to have that in a global environment, right? So we put towers in China, we put towers in Singapore, we put towers in Australia, we had them in Israel, all over the place. And we're then able to manage that farm, if you will, from a Surface tablet in Redmond, right? And so and we took it to just, we had tower pyramids in the cafes, and started to really, work with our customers' heads a little bit, When somebody comes in and they see lettuce growing in the cafe, they immediately think fresh, they think local, and so then no matter where we were buying all of our food, they thought it was local because we were growing this lettuce right in the cafes. And same thing with the tower gardens. What I wanted to be able to do is put them in the office space, not necessarily in the cafes. And so I put them in the office. And then as the lettuce grew, people would watch it grow on a daily basis as they came and went to their desks. And then, we would harvest, and then it would be on the salad bar in the cafe right down below. And we started playing with it. We said, like, we started naming the heads of lettuce. So there's Sally and John and Fred. And so you would watch Fred and Sally grow, and then all of a sudden Fred and Sally would show up on the salad bar. So featuring Fred, the lettuce today, kind of stuff. And so we started and people got engaged with that, right? They really started to have fun with it. So, there was, and I can go on for hours about some of this stuff, but that's just kind of a beginning for us, a place for us to start, Todd.
Yeah, I
And
mean, Microsoft had that initiative where they're trying to go, carbon neutral, carbon negative, and
oh yeah,
delivery of food is one of our biggest carbon polluters,
yeah,
right? I mean, if you're trucking everything in from Mexico or even further south.
yeah,
So your idea was grow it local, right?
that's right.
And eliminate all of that, and there's all sorts of additional studies now that talk about if you can eat it shortly after it's been harvested, that's like the peak
Uh-huh.
nutritional value too, right?
That's
Remember we
right.
were talking about high bricks and
Yep.
all those types of things, and as I remember, you also helped to sponsor an effort that put a bunch of sensors into these towers, and it became a hackathon effort, and it was a winning project. You remember that
Yes.
one? We all
Yes,
got
I
to meet
do. We got
Brad
an
Smith.
audience
Yeah,
with
Brad Smith. Yeah.
Brad Smith. Yes. Yes. That was quite an adventure. But yeah, that was the kind of stuff. And you talk about sustainability and that sort of thing. I mean, we got really deep into sustainability. A couple examples. One is, at the time, Microsoft was building data centers, not like they are today, but this was kind of early on in the data center world, and so I had an opportunity to go with the data center folks over to the Netherlands and see a data center in progress and in process, right? And it was interesting to me because I was just starting kind of on the cusp of what they call circular economies. So using the waste of something to fuel something else. And so interestingly enough, right across the street from our data center in Amsterdam was a great big, probably 2-acre greenhouse. And so I thought, okay, what's the waste from the data center? Well, it's heat and CO2, right? Well, plants love heat and CO2. So I said, well, why can't we take that waste and ship it across the road into that greenhouse? And at the time, the Dutch were working on these robots in the greenhouses, right? So they could pump up the CO2 to higher levels than humans can handle because they were running it with robots. And so it was like it was all this excitement because the tomato plants were growing a lot faster than that. But we really, really got into the circular economy piece of it. And that took us in Redmond, we had biodigesters that we were using, that we were putting our garbage in them, and it would create methane gas. And then we were firing our dish machine
Mm.
off of the gas that was being made by the garbage, right?
Wow.
And then, as we kind of spoke earlier there, we got into bison, and I took a trip to Catalina Island down in California
Yes.
to look at their bison herd because the bison was of interest to me, and I was really, really into it. But as part of that trip, on the far side of the island, USC had a lab there, and they were working on and with black soldier flies. And I have never even heard of black soldier flies, but I got interested because the black soldier flies eat garbage. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but a black soldier fly is a fly in larva state that eats garbage. But then when it becomes a fly, it lives for 4 days. It has no esophagus. It doesn't eat. All it does is mates and dies. And so it's a non-pest fly. But while it's in the larva state, it eats garbage. And so we again opened up the door to the data scientists and the engineers and said, okay, how can you help us with this? And so we had this big trailer. We probably had, I don't know, close to 2 million of these larvae at a time in this trailer. And so we were monitoring their growth rate, we were monitoring the humidity, all of this kind of stuff. And again, back to the circular economies, what we were doing is it takes, I don't know, like 4 or 5 weeks for these larvae to grow to a fly state. But what we were doing is blanching them before they became a fly. And so once they are blanched, then they become chicken food, okay, or fish food. And so we were then taking the blanched black soldier fly larva out to the farm that was, producing our eggs. So we knew exactly what was going in the chicken to be able to give us the eggs that we wanted. And again, this circular economy piece. And then going back to the plants, we got into aquaponics. So we got into fish. And so then that's closed loop, because what we were doing is using the fish to feed the plants by the water that they were in, and then the plants to feed the black soldier flies to feed the fish. So it was a complete circle with what was going on there, and it was just, and it's crazy, but, I was the food guy. And we got into some of this silly stuff, but it was one of those things where I kept opening these doors to be able to find out, oh, well, here's another thing we can do, or another thing we can do. So yeah, it was an exciting time while I was there, for sure.
I just remember the quality of the food was so high, right? I mean, it was like going to a 5-star restaurant, right there on campus. So
we had a great team.
Not only quality, but they had variety as well.
Oh, lots, yes.
Very culturally sensitive.
Yeah, and we got deep involved with the farmers too, and this was way back again before it was popular, but that we had what we called the Misfit Produce Rescue.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the produce that wasn't quite perfect. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The farmer, they would produce all this produce, but some of it wouldn't look very good, and they couldn't sell it in grocery stores because people wouldn't buy it because it didn't look good. Well, all we did is grabbed it and chopped it up and put it on our salad bars, right? So we didn't care what it looked like. And so, we started promoting it, and of course the population got wind of it, and we got a lot of press around it and stuff too. So it was fun and then, again, that took us into working with the farmers and understanding their needs and what they do and don't do. And again, putting that with the tower gardens and all the work we were doing there. And then, there was this, I was kind of spearheading the water movement, if you will, in growing. And then there was another person, Ranveer Chandra, who was doing the dirt farming. And we were staying close together with what we were doing. But he was able to work on the, I think it was a radio spectrum or a light spectrum, to be able to ship data long distances. And so he could use monitors in his fields to be able to, to monitor the dirt and what was in the dirt and that sort of thing, and how to keep it, healthy for the plants to grow. But, again, you and I, Todd, took that to a whole nother level when we got involved with the bison and being able to then track the bison. The bison is a roaming animal, and they don't come into corrals maybe once a year to get vaccinated, and the rest of the time they're out roaming. Well, the ranchers can't keep track of them because they're all over the place, right?
Yes, yes.
So we talked about a way to be able to use the technology that Ranveer was using to be able to help the ranchers monitor their herd better. And again, I don't know if that went anywhere after I left or after you left, Todd, but yeah, we were, like I said, that it just some of the crazy stuff that we just got into because we were part of the food program. And to me, it really all goes back to this idea of making the food program a profit center for Microsoft instead of a cost center.
Yeah.
And that drove, no pun intended, you were cutting edge then in every area of the food business. And I'm sure you're cutting edge now with your new research coverage, your published newsletter. In that regard, given all this context, where do you see AI being applied in the food industry in terms of leading edge like you were doing, Mark, back in the day? And two questions, and how are you applying it to your own gig right now?
Yeah, AI is an interesting technology, and it's funny. I have a really good friend who is been my mentor for AI, and he's out in the stars, but he brings me along, and I'm learning a ton. And in the conversation I had with him today, he said, "Do you remember where you were a year ago with AI?" And I reflected back, and it was like I was using it to ask questions, kind of like Siri or something, and it was so elementary at the time, and now I with the newsletter. It's called Gray Hair Wisdom, grayhairwisdom.org, and everybody sign up. But it's a daily newsletter that brings these different sectors of food service together. And what I'm using is AI to be able to go out and pull articles in that are being written about particular sectors of the industry. In my instance, it's K-12, it's college universities, it's corporate, it's hospitals, senior living, and I threw one kind of ringer in with corrections. And what I wanted to be able to do was bring them together, get them out of their silos and do that. And so it's surprising and the other kind of function around this newsletter was to keep me connected to the industry, because I've tried to retire 3 times. I haven't been successful at it. And so it was like, I love the industry. And so I always want to know what's going on. And I found out this last time that I retired is that I was starting to lose track of what was happening in the industry. So now I'm using AI to pull it in just to educate me and keep me up to date with what's going on. But what I started to find out, I mean, my expertise is in corporate food service, and I spent 26 years feeding college kids. So I understand the college university world, but the rest of it, I don't. I don't understand it. And it's interesting to me to put together a lot of similarities, and surprisingly enough, between K-12 and corrections, because K-12 is money short. Okay. They are feeding these kids on $4 a day. Okay. I don't know how they do it. Okay. Same thing with the corrections, only it's even worse. They're feeding those prisoners at 87 cents a day. Okay. You can imagine what they're eating, right? But the whole thing is controlled by the government, and the government, what they're doing in the Congress and that sort of thing. And so I wasn't really aware of all of this that was going on in these two sectors, right? And then there's a lot of similarities with what goes on with the hospitals and college universities and corporate, because they're the ones with the money, and they have the ability to build new cafes and design new operations and that sort of thing. And so that kind of interests me too. But anyway, getting back to the AI, I'm using it. I'm a single entrepreneur. I have a board of directors that's all AI. a chairman of the board. I have a I say person, but a finance bot, a marketing person. I have a legal person, and then I have a member of each sector that represents that sector as an expert, so that when I get some harebrained idea about something, they, in a sense, know it more than I know it. And so they'll give me ideas, and they'll give me information about, no, you should think about it like this and think about it like this. And so, yeah, I'm using it a ton. I have it's called Beehive. It's a program that builds the newsletter for me, and I schedule it, and and it goes out when it's supposed to go out, and it keeps track of my subscribers, and there's all kinds of different ways to be able to monetize this, but it helps me with that. And I'm just, I learned about MCPs the other day, and that's, the ability to connect, my Claude. I use Claude. I'm using Claude to be able to connect to Beehive. And now I can get all the analytics on Claude and have Claude do a lot of that sort of, stuff. And so again, as I see where I am today, and I look back to where I was a year ago, just asking it silly questions, it was like, holy cow, this is taking me into a whole different stratosphere of learning, education, and then, supporting the newsletter.
Wow,
So
you
you have
really.
an all digital. Go ahead, Todd.
Oh no, I was just going to say you've really been downplaying your knowledge, Mark. This is fantastic. I want to learn more from you, Mike. We need to get our own digital board of directors too.
Well, yeah, well, he's got a whole digital firm of
Yes.
agents.
That's right.
Yeah, my question, I know he's got the digital employees. Do you have a digital twin CEO? And you're the legal living, breathing entity, but sometimes there's a digital CEO
Yeah,
twin.
I spent some time with that decision, and I thought, I'm a dreamer, and I'm the one that, I'm the content creator, if you will. I'm the idea person, and I need to keep myself in the game. And so that's why I position myself as the human in the room, to make sure that that they're not going off and they're not providing me with information that's hallucinations or whatever, right? So I want myself in there, and so I've deemed myself the chairman of the board, but I have a CEO, Edna, who manages the CEO part of
Got
it,
it.
right?
Nice, nice,
Got it.
nice. Well, I just want to circle back. Remember when we were working with the Dancing Crow farm there, and Ranveer went out there, and it was something called TV white spaces. That was actually the
Yes,
technology that he used.
yes, that's right.
And we actually got Bill Gates to come out, and he did a Gates Notes edition from out there at the Dancing Crow
Yep,
farm, and it was all of the farm beats. That
that's
that
right.
was what Ranveer had called it, and
Yeah,
he was using the balloon to take pictures of the
yep,
field. Remember, he was trying to come up with solutions for farmers who, maybe didn't have a whole lot of budget to buy quadcopters at that time, but
right.
still wanted to have the aerial stuff. And I remember it was through our connections and so on at Microsoft that we got that all going. That was pretty fun.
Yeah, it was always fun to see him get engaged, and I don't know if we were the catalyst or whatnot, but I think he's one of the largest landowners besides Ted Turner in the United States, at least. I mean, and he's grabbing up land his whole career, I think, and so it's kind of interesting. You're right, he does stuff with farming, and his interest is there too. So yeah, it was cool. That was
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, it was really fun. So I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper too on your AI. You and I talked a bit about, in order to make a food service operation profitable, or at least keep it within the boundaries of a budget, you introduced a lot of data collection, a lot of measuring,
Yeah.
a lot of quality types of things. And that's where Mike and I came from, was the world of quality and Lean Six Sigma. Can you talk a little bit more at a high level around what you introduced and then where you think AI could play a role,
Yeah.
because I'm sure there was a lot of manual measurements. But you
Yeah.
mentioned something too about the chefs being able to see certain things in glasses, and you mentioned a number of things to me.
Yeah, I teased you a lot, and then now you've it's come back to haunt me. But yeah, so and what we were doing wasn't necessarily related to the financial performance of the cafes. Again, it was circling around sustainability and waste, food waste, right? And what this was, this was way back before AI was
Right.
even a baby. But what we were doing at the time is we were taking the data off of our cash registers, our point of sale systems, and it was all in the cloud. And then we brought in other data sources. So we brought in weather and we brought in traffic patterns and moon phases, even, which was kind of an interesting one. And we put it all into this data lake and we started to use it for predictive analytics. So what we wanted to be able to do was predict how many people would come into a cafe tomorrow. And we did. We got it within a 96% accuracy rate. And then we took it further. We said, okay, we got it to like 84%, 2 weeks out. We could predict how many people would come into the cafe 2 weeks out. And where I was headed with that was the ability to be able to predict maybe even 6 months out based on history, based on, the weather and all that sort of thing, how many people would come into the cafe. But then beyond that, we were, like I said, we were working with farmers. And so I wanted to be able to tell the farmer, plant the tomatoes today because I'll guarantee you I'll buy them because I know that I'm going to sell them. I'm going to use them. But I want them to arrive on my loading dock at the same day that they're being cut and eaten. So now and I have a recipe for that tomato plant. So I can get a soft shelled tomato that's really sweet, like you were talking with bricks. So with a bricks level that's really high. And so now I can in a sense get the exact tomato that I want, and it's at its most nutrition value. So that's where I was headed. And like I said, we got into, like, I think some pretty high numbers, within a 30-day period. That was kind of a cool thing that we were doing. The other thing that we wanted to be able to do was tell the story of the food. Okay. And at the time, my dream, and I don't know if this has ever come about, I think it's starting to develop now even, but my dream was to go down to the cell level and track, the cell of a carrot so that you knew because that carrot traveled through the supply chain, you knew where it stopped, how long it was, kept cool or hot, or how long it was in the you would be able to track that and then understand it, and then tell the customer that when that carrot's fresh, it's either fresh or it's not fresh, and it has some kind of a scale, right?
Right.
So we got into a lot of storytelling and that sort of thing. One of the technologies that we used every year, we took our chefs up to Lummi Island, which is just up north of Seattle, and there's a fishery up there that's a sustainable fishery for salmon. And so we took a camera crew and we took our chefs up there, and the chefs harvested the fish. So we actually had cameras of them, harvesting the fish out of the nets, and the natives were involved, and it was a whole kind of it was really, really cool. But anyway, point being is that what the technology that we got into is that a customer could load an app on their phone so that when they came into the cafe, and the app was connected to their health. Okay. So their doctor had, given them a health plan on how they should eat. And so they were working with the Outlook team to be able to calendar what they should eat on a particular day. And so we were then making that food on that particular day that would meet the needs of that customer. But the technology is that they load this app on their phone, and then when they came into the cafe, the phone would hit a Bluetooth beacon, and it would pop up and say, have the salad today, not the French fries. Okay, so it was an immediate reminder of what they should eat when they come in the cafe. But again, we took that a little bit further, and so when they came over to the salmon dinner that was on the counter, the Bluetooth beacon would pop up on their phone, and it would tell them all the calories and sugars and carbohydrates of that meal. But then in the little corner, we would put a button, and they would hit the button, and it would be a picture of the chef that was right across the counter from you, serving the salmon, harvesting the salmon from our trip to Lummi Island, right? And so the connection then to the food became the story, and people really wanted that story. And so we started to develop that through the Bluetooth beacons and then the data behind it, right? That was, like I said, that was 15 years ago when people weren't doing that. But with AI now, the ability to do that is huge. I mean, I was at a conference, I went to CES this year in Las Vegas, and saw just a ton of stuff. But they had one whole day of food service, and so I went, of course, went to that and listened. And Bobby Flay, who's a famous chef, was on the panel, and it was chefs against AI, right? And the other three panelists were AI experts, right? And so Bobby Flay said, the way that you should use AI is to tell the story of the food. Okay. He says, imagine if you had a can of beans and there was a story behind that bean. They came from Mexico. They were grown in Farmer Juan's field, and they had this much water and blah, blah, blah. There's a whole story in this can of beans. And he said, then imagine you've got a bundle of cilantro, and it has a story. And you have a tortilla, and it has a story. And you put the whole recipe together, and now the recipe has a story. He said, that's the way you should be using AI, is to tell the story of the food. I'm in complete agreement. And I think that is not that far away, okay? Because if you go back to the cell level of a carrot, there's a story of that carrot and the way that it moves along the supply chain, right? So there's that piece of it. And then AI, I mean, again, CES was an eye opener, get it? Because wearables, right? Glasses, right? Glasses, you can have a chef cut a carrot, and it will be filmed by the cameras in your glasses, so that can be shared with every other chef, whether they be in your kitchen or everybody else's kitchen. And they can cut the carrot exactly the same way as the original chef, because it's being projected on their glasses. So now they're cutting it exactly how they want it. So from a training standpoint, I think that that's going to be a real game changer. The other thing then is, and as I like to do, I'll take it a step further. Eventually, we're going to have humanoid robots in the kitchens. Okay. This training that's going on with the glasses is going to be a training session for the robots. And the robots are then going to be able to cut the carrot just like Bobby Flay. And every robot across the nation can cut it the same way, because they all do the same thing with the same amount of data, right? So that's where I think this AI thing is going within the food program, and the way that the things go with the food is there's just so much going on. And like I say, I'm going back to CES, and there's going to be, you talk about drones. They had a whole session on drones and drone delivery, and they're doing it now, I think in Miami and San Francisco and maybe even in Los Angeles now. But anyway, they're doing that, right? And so it's only a matter of time until some of this stuff starts to mature and gets to be, normal, if you will.
If you take your knowledge of the AI capabilities that you saw recently and map it with your experience of experimentation with the garage work, and you also have a vantage point that you can finally evaluate it in retrospect as a retiree, in a
Yes.
sense, is how sustainable was your sustainability effort? So if you have all these capabilities and experiences, what did you learn from the experimentation that you think is going to pair with AI to accelerate this world of the future?
Well, yeah, the interesting thing for me is that, I've spent, I don't know, however, 50 some years in food service, and I like it. I love it. And I have an eye for how things can be applied to food service. And so when I like, this year specifically, because I was more retired than I've been in the past, I went to CES and I had the opportunity to look at those things, all of the things that were going on there from a food service perspective. I also went to South by Southwest in Austin this year, and it's the same sort of a thing. They have a tech and they have music and film, but I spent a lot of time in the tech space and just listening to, people talk about AI and how they're using it to produce newsletters. And then it's one of those, okay, how can I apply that to to food and what I'm doing? And it was the same approach that I took when I spent time in the garage with Todd and the gang, is that I went there because I was the only food guy in the room. I had a whole different perspective than they did. They were trying to get the screw to screw in right, and I was trying to figure out how I could get it on my menu, kind of a thing. And so to me, that was the value of, like, we were talking earlier, is the silly person in the room who asked the funny questions, but that's really, to me, what starts to change the world, is that, you come in with a trained perspective that nobody else has, right?
So
I
I
love
hear
it.
you saying, intellectual curiosity and discipline diversity, everybody with different lenses.
Yes,
We'll,
yes,
we'll make magic sauce, you
yes.
know.
And I got an
That's what I
example
hear
of
you
that.
say.
My management team, I'm a boomer, right? And my management team was probably not as old as I am, but they're close, right? And we sat down in a meeting one day and I said, wait a minute, we're we're old people designing things for these young kids who are eating it. I said, wait a minute, we need to get a different voice in the room. And so we did, and we invited these young people into a meeting. We had it every other week, and we sat at a table and we pitched our ideas to them and said, what do you think? What do you think? Right? The first two meetings, they were nervous. They're in there with the big executive and they're scared to death, right? And then all of a sudden the environment, kind of got comfortable to them. And by the fourth meeting and fifth meeting, they were leaning in and they were giving us good advice. And then what we said is, okay, we're bringing all these ideas to you. What would you want to see in our cafe? Right. And again, it was all based around sustainability and that sort of thing, which we were already on that path. But one of the things that they brought forward was crickets. Okay. And I'm a boomer. They said crickets. I said, there's no freaking way that we're putting crickets on our menu. We just aren't going to And then I stepped back and I said, wait a minute. And they explained it to me. They said a cricket only eats or drinks the amount of water that it gets from the food that it eats, right? So it's a sustainability play for them because it's saving water if people eat crickets. I said, okay, we'll try it. We'll see what happens. So I said, cricket flour, we can make cookies out of cricket flour. And I said, that's okay. So we tried that. And it was, it was mildly popular. And because it's cookie, it's full of sugar and, who wouldn't want a cookie, right? And so, but then I said, okay, let's take crickets and take them into the dining room and just see what happens if people will eat them. Right. And so it was like Costco. We took these little tasters in there and we walked from table to table and we said, would you like some crickets? The boomers in the room leaned back and said, no way. The young people in the room said, yes. And they not only said yes, and they grabbed 4 or 5 of the little containers, they got on their phone and they texted their friends who were upstairs at their desk saying, they're putting crickets on the menu. You got to get down here. And all of a sudden there was this rush to the dining room to get the crickets. And so back to the idea of having diversity in your management team that was a key piece of learning for me is that I would have gone down the no cricket, in this case, the no cricket line, but they were there. And we never ended up putting them on the menu, but we did serve them every now and then, which was kind of weird.
Well, being that you're a boomer, I'm dying to ask you this question, Mark, dying. I get joked a lot because I work with Gen Zers and alphas and what have you.
Yeah.
And there's constant lists of the 50 stupid things that boomers do. I don't know if you've seen them, or the 20 stupid things. And one of them is food related. It's eating meatloaf is considered a stupid thing. As a food expert, is that true? Is that a dumb thing? I sense that all generations like meatloaf.
Well, yeah, and I guess the kind of the bigger question around that is, that's comfort food. I classify that as comfort food, and you're right.
Yes,
I
it
love
is.
meatloaf, and boomers love meatloaf because that's what we grew up on, right?
Yes.
One of the things going back to AI that we did when we started analyzing our menus off of the cash registers is that normally a chef will say, comfort food, you should serve it in winter time because that's when people want comfort food. And the data that we found was that we sell more macaroni and cheese in July than we do in December, right? So it myth busted the whole idea of comfort food, right? And so it was really, really interesting. Some of the things that we tested and tried, and when we got into the chefs were skeptical of the machine and the information that the machine would give. And so we started playing with that and we said, okay, you tell me how many burgers you think you're going to sell today, and we'll have the machine tell us, right? And so we put man against machine, if you will. And it was funny because the machine became right, and pretty soon the chef said, there's no reason for me to question the machine because it's right more than it's not. And so it allowed them to get over that hump of this machine's taking my job away kind of a thing. It's really kind of more of a help to what they were doing and stuff. And again, this was 15 years ago before any of this other stuff was going on, right? So yeah, the comfort food thing was a big surprise to me, but again, the data showed that was the case. So it's amazing some of the stuff that came out of this.
Yeah, I love all the lessons here. Just really, really great. I wanted to ask you, getting down toward the end here, I wanted to ask you a question in regard to people who are thinking about changing careers and maybe getting in, because we knew a lot of people who had thought about farming their whole lives and have wanted to kind of get back to the land. That was just one idea, or getting into food. Do you have some insights into what could be some good careers for people who are looking to get into food, either on the growing side or on the preparation side in this new age of AI?
Well, yeah. Again, to me, AI is open to everybody. It's just if you want to put in some kind of energy, and it's really surprising what, I mean, it will teach you. You don't really need to know anything, right? But yeah, when I was playing with the tower gardens, and we got engaged with the farms and the farmers, the organic farmers and that sort of thing. And, you know, my farming is a tough life, right? I mean, it's hard because you're dependent on the weather a lot. And if you have a bad year, you have a really bad year. And so a lot of the children of the farmers are not becoming farmers. They're going into AI and doing all that kind of stuff. And so my vision was to kind of change that and make farming sexy again, if you will. And that's why we went into the hydroponics, because it was new and interesting. And quite honestly, there's a lot of hydroponic farming happening now. And like I said, the Netherlands is like the second largest produce producer in the world, you know, compared, US is number one, and the Netherlands is number two. It's a small little country,
Small country, yeah, yeah. And they
but
export so
they
much. It's
but
crazy.
they do it all in greenhouses, and they've got water figured out from many, many years. And so they're making it sexy again, I think. And so the idea of farming, I think, is starting to pick up, but it's not dirt farming. And I had an opportunity to speak at the World Expo in Milan, and Microsoft sponsored the USA Pavilion there, and it was all about feeding the world in 2050, right? And with 10 billion people on the planet, and I did my speech, going with water and uh, you know hydroponics and that sort of thing. I stepped off stage, and the Italian press stuck microphones in my face and said, "What about the farmers? What about the farmers? You're putting the farmers out." It's like, and they're talking in a different language, and I'm working through an interpreter, and it's just going nuts, right? But what I said to them is that we need both. We need the dirt farmers for wheat, rice, some of the bigger crops, and then the smaller crops can be done locally, and it can be done through water. So it isn't like we're trying to put the farmers out of work or anything like that. It's that there's enough for everyone
Yeah.
if we work, in a sense, work together. And again, that's kind of a theme, I guess, what I'm talking about here, because I'm trying to get these sectors of the food service people to work together, right? But anyway, so yeah, I think that farming is becoming more sexy, if you will. I mean, we got into microgreens, right? And so we were growing
Yes.
microgreens on campus, and I took one whole cafe. I took away all the lettuce on the salad bar, and we just did microgreens. And it went crazy because right behind the line where the salad bar was, I had about, I don't know, 15 or 20 of these microgreen growers. They're all lit up, and you can see the microgreens growing, and then they're on the salad bar, right? So it's just like, it's those kinds of things that make it fun, and
Yes.
again, like I say, sexy, so that people will continue to explore those kinds of things.
Yeah. And maybe some more synergies, like you were saying earlier, between the data centers and the grow operations, right?
Yeah.
So use what used to be thought of as waste, heat,
Yes.
CO2, and marry those two, and
Yep.
then utilize the AI to also
Yep.
analyze the data and help you do a better job. It seems like
That's right.
you could really kind of introduce a whole new level of a super smart digital farmer in a sense.
Yeah. 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 And again, labor is the expense in a lot of this. And so if you can have these farmers not have to do as much hiring as they were, or whatever, but or help help those farmers manage their farms better through AI, I think that's gonna help everything, right?
Yeah, and then the robotics perhaps can help with some of that labor in the near
Exactly.
term. Yeah, yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. I really want to thank you, Mark, for your time here and your friendship and support through the years. I don't think I would have had the courage to go after everything like the underwater data centers and everything if it wouldn't have been for mentors like you and Mike. So thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate
Mike,
it, Todd.
yeah, Mike, any last thoughts?
Well, just a thank you for the insights and the fun. And it's encouraging to be a boomer and see another boomer with that energy level. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, guys. And it's a treat to be on and just get to spew some of the, what I consider to be the cool things that we did there. And it was, it was just phenomenal to be able to be a part of it. It was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. All right, cool.